People really saying this is better than Barter 6? Barter 6? This is better than Barter 6? So this is Young Thug's debut album. I guess, because he's had plenty of mixtapes already. So I think he's even changed some of them from like albums to mixtapes and stuff like that. So maybe this isn't even a debut album. Who knows? But for now, we're calling it that. It's going to be his biggest selling album to date. It's going to chart number one on the Billboard 200 albums chart. It also has one of his biggest songs to date as well, with J. Cole and Travis Scott. Things looking pretty huge for Young Thug at the moment, and he's already had a pretty successful career up until this point. It's actually really weird to see how he's gaining more success when I've already felt like he's had so much success already. And so much fun is not quite as fun as I want it to be, but I still think it's very good. Not quite a great album because I think there are three or four too many tracks dragging it down, particularly at the beginning, which is very weird. It's kind of strange to see an album progress as it goes along and get better somehow. That's not something you come across very often, but I actually think this album is one of those rare occurrences. I personally feel as though once you get to Light It Up, the album really does kick in. The first two tracks really underwhelm me. Sup Mate with Future. I do kind of like the ad-libs and stuff on that track, and the way, you know, they're saying mate is just really funny to me for some reason. But the beat itself is honestly just a bit too stiff. Doesn't really do anything for me. The first track as well, I think Thugger's rapping and his hook on that track is nowhere near as impressive as what he's doing on the rest of the album. So it is a bit of a shame to kind of have to sit through these first few tracks to get to the good stuff. I will say Ecstasy is pretty solid, definitely the best of the first four songs, but it's not as impressive to me as what he's doing later on in the album, especially when the beats start to get really, really good. And then the fourth track with Gunna is just kind of whatever. I don't really feel anything specific towards that. It's kind of to me, but then the second track that Gunna is featured on is just so much better. The hook on Surf to me is just so sunny, it's so bright. The track is filled with so much bursting energy. I can't help but feel happy whenever I hear it. Light It Up as well, with the hooks on these two tracks just are so cartoonish, they're so animated, and they're just so exciting. Every time they're on, I just want to get up and dance, man. It's one of those occurrences where you can just repeat the same word or repeat the same phrase over a really good beat, and you can make it work really well. Something like Playboy Carti is already mastered at this point. And it's not like the good songs just end there as well. I mean, the album continuously gives the goods as you dig deeper and deeper into it. What's the Move with Lil Uzi Vert? Similar again as some of my praises for the previous tracks I've mentioned. This track again just has such a fantastic beat. The lyrics aren't particularly anything you want to really be paying attention to, because Thugger isn't exactly a lyrical master. He doesn't need to be though when he sounds so good on these beats. His flows are just so fantastic. His voice just has so much character. His inflections are just so weird and unique that it just eliminates any possible reason why you'd be reading the lyric sheet whilst listening to this album, because you just don't need to. Even though lines like "Shorty pussy so tight I had to finger her with a stick" do stick out like a horrid sore thumb, you kind of just move on and just, you know, carry on bouncing around to the tracks because they are just so good. The 21 Savage feature is pretty funny as well. I just think some of the lines he comes out with are just so ridiculous that, again, I can't help but feel like he's just kind of trying to amp himself up to sort of match Thugger's weirdness. Because I think if you're on a track with Young Thug, you do need to realize that you got to bring something a bit different, especially if he's being all crazy and weird and dropping ridiculous lines too. And I think 21 Savage actually manages to fit in really well on the track. Similarly with J. Cole actually, which is very weird considering I'm always so negative towards J. Cole, but I actually think he works really well on the closing track. And then Travis Scott comes in with a solid hook as well, which is so rare, really rare. Travis Scott sounding good on a feature. He's always so out of place to my ears whenever he's on a feature, but then again, he's not really that out of place on the type of production that Young Thug comes through with, because they have collaborated before together and it worked incredibly well in the past, so it would work again here. Weirdly though, his hook does remind me of some of the UK grime scene at the moment. I can't really quite place what it is or who he sounds like, but the way he's kind of like, you know, throwing in a bit of like a monotone delivery over this kind of like wavy type beat. It just reminds me of some of the trendy stuff that's going on in the UK right now. I can't quite place it, but it just gets me thinking of that. Now, for as much as I always want to praise Thugger's wildness and weirdness and eccentricity, it does hold him back on one of the tracks on this album for me, Pussy. I mean, that track I just can't stand. I think the repetition of him constantly saying pussy is really ugly. The production is really like upbeat and in your face, so you may just like it for how much of a hype track it is, but for me it just gets really annoying. It's not like he can't do songs like this as well. I mean, Jeffrey was filled with so many balls to the wall, fucking hype, wild tracks that just were killer. All of them just completely killed it for me. I think it's a great album, but this just isn't working for me. And perhaps the most disagreeable opinion I'll offer this year will be that track to me is somehow worse than the track with Nav on it. And Nav is never a good feature, but somehow that song is worse than the Nav song. Honestly, Nav's hook isn't that bad. I think it's kind of fun. The lyrics obviously are terrible, but you know, if you're willing to ignore most of the lyrics across the album, you're probably just throwing in your own bias against Nav for pointing out how bad his lyrics are, to be honest, because there aren't really many good ones on this album. But I would still take it out of the album though. I mean, he overrides the second half of the song with his own verse that just isn't needed. But the hook, I think, is okay. Yeah, it's actually alright, but yeah, it could go. You could get rid of this song and it'd be fine. And that's kind of how I feel on this album, really. You could really cut out a couple of tracks, especially at the beginning, like I've already said, and you'd probably have like an 8 out of 10 here, but I don't think everything quite lives up to the best tracks on the album. Like, there's so many great ones, but then there are some duds. But the best track for me overall in the whole thing, though, is Mannequin Challenge, which is weird to say that a song called Mannequin Challenge in 2019 is good. And not only is it good, it's actually great, but not only is it great, it features Juice WRLD, and somehow it's still great. The beat on this one, whew, and his flow over this beat. Thugger's flowing on this beat. Oh my god, what a track. What a track. Yeah, this is great. Easily my favorite track on the album, and overall a really good album as well, I think. There's not much more else I could say. I guess I haven't talked about every track, but a lot of the tracks do offer what I've already mentioned anyway, and there are just a few tracks that don't really give me that same hype as others, which is why I will end on a 7 out of 10. This is a very good album that is just bogged down by one too many duds, but I still think it's absolutely worth your time. Not as good as his best work. I still think Jeffrey and Barter 6 are locked in that sense, but still, you'd want to be checking this out because there are so many good songs here. Thank you for watching my review. Let me know how you feel on this album, and have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below. David Rowe, don't get mad at me. I love you. Goodbye.